Okay, so how great is this? Our guest today on Food Bites was actually at the meeting with Jane, which we also, Kathy Lennon was there, who we talked with last week, but also this special person was there as well. And Jane got to listen to her, and she said, Glenn, you've got to get her onto Food Bites as well. She was really interesting and really good. But we've really been looking forward to this. This is Kristen Thompson-Dow. Now, Kristen, you just got a promotion, so I have to get this right. You work for New Life Mills, but you're the layer and pullet business manager, correct?
That's right, Glenn.
And are you based in Cambridge?
That's where our sales office is, but I actually live closer to the mill that we have. One of the feed manufacturing mills is out by Denfield, just outside of Ilderton. And I only live a little over 10 minutes just north of that location. So I spend a fair bit of time in and out of that facility as well.
No, that's interesting. You talked to Jane about something, you mentioned something, just it was a line that you used in the talk that you gave that I want to get to shortly, but it's really remained with her and remained with me as well, but we'll talk about that shortly. But can you just give us a bit about your background, Kristen, because I think that's important, because that's really what I want to talk about.
Certainly. I have been born and raised out by the Elsa Craig Lucan area on a family farm in Middlesex County. I have always been interested in what goes on our farm. We have beef cows and calve them out, and then we have cash crop as well, and that's mostly a rotation of corn, soybeans, and wheat, and we also grow hay for our cows as well. And so then with that, always if you had to go to the house and help mom, or else you had to go and go help dad, I always kind of preferred helping my dad do different things on the farm. I always found that very interesting and often very rewarding. Went through, high school knowing I wanted to pursue agriculture. Never really thought I'd be considered or labeled as a farmer, but continued on with education at Ridgetown College and in agribusiness, and then was employed when I graduated there at New Life Mills, and have been there ever since, promoted through the different stages of this organization to be here, but also then on the farm side of what we do, as I have always enjoyed that. Instead of have to do the work, I might as well have something to show for it, and started to invest in buying some of my own beef cows, and that has continued on for me. And then that's also, actually I have twin boys that are now 19 years old, and they are owners of some of the cows in our herd as well.
Wow. So let's talk about your dad for a bit. I'm sure that you will remember this guy.
This guy is the epitome of agriculture. He works in acres, not hours. He cares for his land and family, but not for recognition. This guy is a farmer. He and his family have been feeding Ontario for generations. Without this guy and the food he produces, none of us would be here. Kudos to this guy and the many like him, the unsung heroes who work tirelessly to feed our growing world.
So that was a commercial I voiced over a couple of years ago for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and also for Fields to Forks. But your dad was in that, right? Which is, I think you were in it too. But is this him? Is this him?
Yes, that's correct.
That's right. Tell me a bit about him.
Oh gosh, he's my dad. We work together. He's always farmed. He's always he grew up on a farm. I actually live on the farm where he grew up, and feel very honored to be able to say that. And so I didn't move far when I got married. I moved up and over a mile and a quarter, and he's still right into it every day. He's just right into it and helping out. He really does so much work, because everyone else in our family has off-farm jobs as well. And so Dad's really still part of the day-to-day, and he's in his late 70s. I know that commercial meant a lot to him. That was a big thing. It was certainly outside of his box to have him participate in something like that, and I know it has a very special spot for him. He is talking about more and more every year, I guess, as he ages as well, about future generations, which would include, my sons and the role that they play in our farming. future, and I think that's really important for us. Dad certainly is very passionate about what he does. He really complains, rarely complains for the hours that he puts in and the age that he is. He shows up and gives her as best he can. And I think that shows a lot to, I think, my sister and I as we were growing up on our farm, and what that meant, and also then for what it means for my sons to see that and that work ethic that goes into farming.
Yeah. So you've hit on there what the thing was that really stuck with Jane. When you were speaking that night, you had, she said it was a great talk, and you told your personal story, which is great, but you said that farmers, people in agriculture, think in terms of generations. And she came back, and it was actually a pretty profound thought when you think about it. 200, 300 years ago, it probably wouldn't have been. But now when you think about business and how we look at the business world, and farming is a business, you tend to think more in terms of just our own particular involvement in particular time, our own employment. But it really is true, because there is a kind of an estate, kind of a built-in knowledge that's been there for a long, long time that gets transferred to the next generation and the next generation. The idea that you'd be thinking in generations, I find very unique. We direct a food bank here in London, for instance, or I was a firefighter for 30 years in London. And so, you think of there was my career, and that's it, and it's kind of it, and you move on. At the food bank, we've now been at it 38 years this month, but we're not thinking generationally. Right? We're just thinking how we meet these demands that are here now. This whole idea of generations and the passing, and not just of time and resources, but the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next, must be a fascinating, stage that you have to be on in order to do what you do in agriculture. You realize that you're part of some kind of history as opposed to just the present. Is that what you were trying to say? I don't want to put words in your mouth. What did you mean by it when you said it?
Oh, it's 100% all of that. It's anything from just the verbal knowledge of what we do, of why we are doing what we do today, what, opportunities is there to have viable options for the future. When you tile your ground, right, someone his age puts some money in a big investment into upgrading that system in his ground. It's not about what he's going to get the value of. It's the value that's going to come, over the next 50 years and the generations of us that hopefully, continue for that long, and even my kids' kids, right? And that opportunity, it's the conversations. We have a pasture up in the Paisley area where we keep our cows and calves through the summer. And you have a long truck ride there. You spend a long day with your dad up there for years. That's how it's been. His conversations of kind of how he got to where he is, what his goals and aspirations are, learning how to fence when you're up there. And that's kind of I don't know, it's an old skill, I guess, right? And some of the tools and the way you do things, it just carries on. And then this year, I spent more time up there with one of my sons, and you don't realize sometimes what you learn because of, I guess, of certain situations. And then when you're in a new situation and you can be part of teaching, your son, the things that your dad spent years teaching you, it just evolves, and it's an exciting feeling.
Am I right, though, Kristen, if I say that, like, we have a number of folks that are farmers, growers, producers that we know, and they find it increasingly difficult to transfer all that stuff on to the next generation. There's lots of reasons behind that. Some of it has to do with laws and the passing of wealth and land and other things down to the next generation. Some of it has to do with the fact that the next generation is often more, they're finding it more appealing to go to cities and things like that where a lot of the attractions are. Jane and I work in Sudan. That's a country, South Sudan, that's a country of 8 million people that are there, almost all of it pastoral or rural. But almost all of the young people are trying to get to the main towns that are in the country. Is that Is that a trend here that is happening now in agriculture, or is that just a unique thing maybe to some people?
I think it's a trend in agriculture in general. It comes from many different ways. Some of it is I guess, because of the high cost of land today. How do you get a young person to take that on as prices have gone up? How do you bring them in? There's the facts of 7 days a week, 365, right?
That's a lot.
Your holidays, I'd really be a great day to go to the lake, but you know what, we've got hay to do, and it's one or the other, and you got to make hay when the sun shines, so you don't go to the lake. But it it is very challenging. There's they often say we're a generation away from so many more people not being less connected to the farms, and we are still very much a family farm. There's a lot of family farms out here, but it does come with the struggles. I guess that's part of why our family still has off-farm jobs on the financial side of it and where that goes. But I think in the future, there's still opportunities for people there. There's opportunities, not just on the family farm, but to work in general in agriculture. It is a huge part of our county and of Ontario's economy to be successful, and with really good job opportunities in so many sectors. And that's a great connection to have there as well. Where do you balance all of that? Is sometimes tough, but that's why I guess I don't think I could be where I am in the organization at New Life today if it wasn't for the way my dad has chosen to kind of continue on. And you can always say there's right, wrong, and indifferent in those succession plans, but succession plans are a big topic, and especially with the financial involvement that it takes today to run a farm.
Yeah. When you were at Brescia, the subject there that evening was about women in agriculture, right? And, did you sense as you were coming up through that whole process over the years and going to Ridgetown as you did to move into that field, did you sense that being a woman made you different? That certain things were blocked off to you, or was the way that your family was and the way that your fellow farmers were, you just were part of the group that you were moving on? I think it's important for us to know, because I have talked to some women who are in agriculture that found kind of a bias there against that, especially as they started something newer to do. How was it for you?
Oh, there's been good days and bad days of it. For the most part, I guess I felt that if you did the work, you would be rewarded. Yeah. And I never wanted to stand out as a woman. I wanted to be part of the group, right? Part of the sales team or whatever level that you're at. And that's what I felt meant inclusion, to be in this. I remember going to a meeting and one of my first meetings in sales, and it was a producer meeting, and one gentleman who was an older gentleman came over and asked if I was going to start my own club, and I said, no, I want to be part of yours, right? So, and it wasn't about, again, right, if you represent yourself well as a knowledgeable individual, whether you're a man or a woman, and whether you're 25 or 45, right? How do you show up to be a knowledgeable representative and continue to learn and grow? I think that's what makes you successsul in any sector. And it wasn't always easy. I will admit that there was things, but you got to make sure you don't let it define you. You just continue to surround yourself by the right people and strong people, male or female, to mentor and help you grow. And I feel that has been a big part to the success that I have today.
Are you free to talk about maybe one of the hurdles that you had to overcome or obstacle that you felt? You don't have to, but I mean, I think it would be helpful for us to understand.
Yeah, there's just a few that run into my mind that I just to cover it off. It's going on a sales call and somebody asked if I was out there, to find a husband. Is that what I was doing on the farm?
Yeah.
Right. And you're like, no, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. Right. I'm good that way. But where do you get the respect that way? How do you show up there? And luckily that was far and few in between. But I do think you do have to kind of work a little harder as a woman, as a mom, to balance that out. As I kind of joked to someone one time, I said, how many times do you have to go home and worry about, sorting through the closet, when you go home, it's winter clothes time. Oh my gosh, what's there? How many men worry about that, when they come home or when they going to leave for work in the morning? There's just those kinds of obstacles.
Yeah.
I had customers say, and it was very respectful of them. They said, after I was going off on a mat leave, they said, oh, it's okay. You don't have to come back. And as it's okay still to be an at-home mom, right, and have that role. And my mom always worked out all our lives. She had an off-farm job and did well, and so we saw her balance it, and we knew. I thought, oh well, it's okay to do that. There's days that it's harder than others, but you work through that. Sometimes I was maybe a little disappointed I didn't have some opportunities given to me at the time, which were a little hard to swallow, of course, but in hindsight, it gave me opportunities to do some things with my children that I maybe wouldn't have had the time to be involved in if I had some different opportunities given to me. And it's only through growth and recognition and over time that you really realize that maybe you might have been a little, I'm going to say mad, for the lack of a better term, a little mad at the fact, but in hindsight, it was probably the right thing too. So over time, how does that reflect what goes on? It's not easy, but I don't know. I think how do you want to show up every day is a big part of it.
Yeah. I appreciate you talking about that, Kristen. I do. When they gave me the script for that ad, that commercial there that your dad was in, you were in, it was, there was one line that really struck out to me, that they don't do it for recognition. And that did strike me because, I've been at the food bank a long time. We do work with local growers and suppliers and others. And it's really true. There's something about the culture of growing, of agriculture, of farming, that's not so much in the sales side of it, but just in the work part of it. I would try to get some of these growers or farmers to come into the community and speak to committees and other things about some of the challenges that they face, that we face as a community, and they didn't want to do it. They weren't comfortable. And but within the city, it's like everybody feels like they're cramming in a crowded space to try to get recognition for what it is that they are doing. And that's because that's part of the life that they're living. All that competition is there. But there seems to be, I presume for a woman being in agriculture, being part of a culture that doesn't talk about, I could be wrong, you can correct me immediately, that doesn't talk about it too much, hold it out there, put it all on social media or whatever it is, but just, as a woman, you understand it and you quietly do the work, and it's going to be in your work that you will ultimately be recognized for your quality and what you do. Would that be right?
Yeah, yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I do wonder about that, but gee, the farmers that I know, they're just the aw shucks kind of people, right? It's just so hard, and it's hard for us now because as a food bank, we're really trying hard in London to talk about food security. That as long as you keep concentrating on donating to charities or donating to food banks or whatever, there comes a time in which you almost peak out with that. And we're in one of those seasons now. Just the average donor in London, for instance, has trouble paying rent. They have trouble affording food at the grocery store. They might work for minimum wage. It's hard for them to buy a house. It's hard for them to pay off student loan. Economically now, it's just really a challenging time. And and what we're trying to do as a food bank and say, when it comes to food, we need to concentrate on food security, not food insecurity. We need to concentrate on this ability to work with the growers and producers and processors that are around and about us in London, to bring them into London so that their products come in and they get sold here and they be recognized here for the quality of what has been grown. Sometimes that's a bit difficult to do because we just are so set in our ways within cities. It's just the way it is. The grocery store system is the main thing that we go by. But also when you try to talk to growers and producers, can you come in, could you speak with us about that, how you would love to be in to these markets and do it? They're very hesitant to do so. So it sometimes makes that difficult. But there are ironies in all of that. I do think that really, in the end, we as consumers fail to make that link between ourselves and you, or ourselves and your dad. The link kind of stops when we go to the store, and that's it. Do you feel that in this era, when small and medium-sized farms in general are having so much difficulty, do you kind of feel like a forgotten generation in that way? That the fact that connectivity is no longer as strong as it once was?
It certainly comes with its challenges in so many sectors. And even with my role at New Life, right, where a lot of focus on the supply management side with poultry and what is there, right? It is about the local products, right? Our local, as a cash crop farmer, our grains go in towards the feed of to the animals, the layers, the pullets, the broilers, the turkeys, that side of things, or even on the dairy side. Where do we continue to see, the labels of Ontario? Ontario milk and Ontario products available to us, and even at the the fruits and vegetable side of buying local and sustaining that side of it. You see more and more photos on different meat products as a marketing side of it, with local growers, that are there for that connection. And it is a talk that goes in through many of the different industries out here about how do we stay connected, whether it's the display at the CNE or at the fairs, that it's actual farmers standing there talking to the people and explaining their story and helping them understand what goes on. It is so important to continue to know where our food comes from, and it is changing. It is not just out of the superstore. And that the price is going up isn't all lining the pockets of the farmers today, as everybody talks about how it's so much more to buy your groceries as well. It's not all just going into the producer, like the farmer's pockets. There's many other levels that go from farm to before it comes onto your table, and I think it's important to understand where that goes, and that the challenges that are out here are affecting everyone, and in all society levels, and what that means to help us, so that we can continue to share our stories and talk about what it's like and help make that connection and bridge the gap. There's a lot of value in that moving forward.
Yeah, some of the narrative we've been building here at the food bank is that in speaking with local farmers and others, the majority of them have said how they would really appreciate more opportunities to bring their products to London and have them sold at various venues that are there. They believe that their food is just as good as anything you're going to get at a supermarket or a grocery store or whatever it is, but there's a lack of opportunities for those folks. Some have talked about having to take it up to the terminal in Mississauga and trying to dispose of it that way, or going over to some other regional centers to try to sell their product. And the truth of the matter is they only live a 20-minute drive from downtown London, but they're having trouble finding those venues. I think that that's true. I mean, I've been at this long enough that I've seen that that's true. Is that also true in other centers, or some, say, in the Cambridge or Guelph area, whatever, have some of those really kind of maximized those opportunities for local grocers and given them the opportunity, the local growers, and given them opportunity?
I think there's opportunity, but again, it is hard, right? Where do you find some of the smaller stores, right? Do you have enough product to have consistent availability, right? That is a big thing. Is it a seasonal item, right? How do you get your locally grown asparagus into the food land and in your center, right? How do you do that? I mean, back years ago, my dad talked about, and my grandma would talk about, raising fowl, and then they would butcher the birds, in the around Christmas, and then bring them into the market at the Covent Garden Market back in London, and then that was their Christmas money. Big day in town, right? When you could bring that in and work with that, where that isn't very common today to have those scenarios, but you do see more business growth and opportunities coming through for people to try to do that, and even if they're a little bigger facility, that they will maybe still have a market available. There's some different beef farmers out our way, that have grown their online marketing options that they advertise more and more, trying to promote what they do and their product on the beef. It's a lot of work, right? It's new opportunities. How do you market it? How is it sustainable? And working towards kind of that niche market. How did we get away from it? Because, back years ago, as I said, that's a story my dad talks about is what they did. So over 70, 80 years ago, how that was much more common than what it is today. And how do we get back to that? And again, the growing population and as we say, right, food banks, whatever the world needs to eat. And how do we keep doing it in really even in a green and environmental sustainable way?
Yeah. And, it's still a true reality that, you need alternatives in any community. You need competition in any community. And when one sector kind of dominates it, the price of food can often remain artificially high. Right. But when there are alternatives and there are markets and in food stalls, all of those different kind of things, the more food that comes into a community from various sources, generally the cost of food goes down because of that kind of competition. But if there's kind of a monopoly or exclusivity to most of those supplies, then food can stay abnormally high. And I think that's part of why we're in some of the difficulties we are now. But really, food security isn't just about finding food to give to low-income families. Food security is providing affordable, accessible, good, nutritious foods to everybody in the community, not just those that are of low income. And the best way to do that is not to have a whole separate industry that's growing, that's trying to help people that are on low income. It's to make that food affordable for everyone. And that way, even people who are of low-income families can do it. It's really hard to get that message across because the idea of grocery stores and the way it's been for the last 50 years has just been ingrained in our thinking. It's really difficult. Do you find that frustrating?
Oh, I think so. But you see some smaller markets, with people that have developed their own shops and marketed very well, and the growth that they've seen, it's great. It's a lot of work for them, but it's rewarding work as well. And I think what we eat is different than what it used to be as well too. We've got a lot of different options out there, from conventional methods of how animals are raised, and again, then grass-fed or your organic options, or vegans, vegetarians. What are all of those? And again, what is available to reach that all out for everyone is important, and the choices, right? Like, we don't all drive the same car. Right, but because we have choices, and you can drive different vehicles, and where that goes. So again, to have the choices available for when you're going to buy your food and feed your family is very important. And how does that continue to go? And we found it even through COVID when there were shortages. Where did all the eggs go, or some of the other concerns that were out there, right? How the markets change through different, factors, that things you just can't foresee.
Yeah, I understand. Kristen, you're very not only eloquent on this stuff, but you're pretty passionate as well, which I think is really important. I have discovered over my time that it's one thing to communicate information. It's one thing to channel it through somebody that really believes in it. And obviously you do that. I really appreciate you doing this today. Our time is up. Thank you, Dad, for me. I'm really glad to be part of that ad with him. But if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind circling back to you at some point, because I think we need a much better understanding of this kind of middle ground that's between where the growers are at and where the consumers are at, not just where the industry is at. And I think you can really help us with that, because you've got a real good common sense about you that would help us to understand that better. Would you mind if we circle back to you at some point?
That would be lovely. Thank you very much. I would appreciate that.
Kristen, thank you for doing this, and thank you for all the hard work that you and all the others do for us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.